Message from the Stars, how Erich von Däniken rewrote human history and revealed the secrets of the Anunnaki. Erich von Däniken forever shredded our history textbooks when he revealed that the revered gods were actually pilots in space shuttles and reclassified humanity as the direct descendants of an extraterrestrial civilization. This video is a tribute to the man who taught us to look at the sky and at our own past with completely different eyes. Just a few days ago, on January 10, 2026, this Swiss researcher and father of the Ancient Astronaut theory passed away at the age of 90. He has gone to the place he spent his entire life gazing toward, with longing: the stars. You ask, who are we? Where did we come from? And what if the gods our ancestors prayed to weren't supernatural spiritual beings, but travelers of flesh and blood? Erich von Däniken dedicated his life to finding answers to these questions. His journey, which began in a strict Jesuit school and led through the kitchens of ocean liners to worldwide fame, reveals a fascinating story. A story that humanity is part of a much larger family in the universe than we are willing to admit. Erich von Däniken was not a typical academic locked away in a dusty library. He was a provocateur. His passion for mysteries was born during his studies, where biblical texts and religious dogmas led him to ask questions the church didn't like. Later, while working in the hospitality industry and traveling the world, he began noticing patterns that archaeology ignored. Today, crowned with both fame and criticism, he presents the world with a legacy that cannot simply be dismissed. The Stone Age geometry, a message for the future. One of the key pieces of evidence Daniken pointed to is the megalithic structures in Brittany, France, specifically in Carnac. Here stand thousands of massive stones, menhirs, arranged in rows stretching for kilometers. While archaeologists see ritual processions or astronomical calendars, Daniken pointed out fascinating geometric anomalies. In his books, he claimed that the arrangement of the stones corresponds to the principles of Pythagorean triangles. Here we encounter a paradox. Pythagoras defined his theorems around 500 BC, yet these stones were erected more than 4,000 years earlier. How could Stone Age people know the principles of complex geometry? According to Daniken, there is only one logical explanation. Someone gave them instructions. Some big boss or commander of an alien expedition ordered the creation of a monument that would last through the ages. It was a time capsule intended for a generation that would possess the technology, such as aerial photography, to recognize the pattern. Without these stones, we wouldn't be asking questions today, Daniken used to say. It was a deliberate provocation of the intellect of future generations. The Mayan Astronaut, the man at the controls. When speaking of Daniken, we cannot overlook his most famous proof, which he popularized worldwide: the sarcophagus lid of the Mayan King Pakal in Palenque, Mexico. Official archaeology sees a relief of the king falling into the underworld, surrounded by symbols of corn and the sacred tree of life. However, in 1968, Daniken came forward with an interpretation that shocked the world. "Look at that image through the eyes of a 20th century technician," he challenged. "We see a figure in a semi-seated position, body leaning forward, hands on levers and controls, feet on pedals. At the nose, the figure has something resembling a breathing apparatus. And strangest of all, flames and smoke are shooting out from the rear of the machine." For Daniken, this was not a metaphor for death, but a technical blueprint of a launching rocket ship. Even though experts in Mayan iconography shook their heads, millions of readers around the world doubted the official narrative for the first time. What if the Mayans saw a rocket launch and recorded it in the only way they knew how, using their religious symbols? The airport of the gods in Nazca. Equally fascinating is Daniken's view of the Nazca plain in Peru. Giant geoglyphs of animals and geometric lines, visible only from high altitudes, are viewed by archaeologists as ritual paths for processions begging for water. Daniken, however, asked a pragmatic question. Why would anyone create art for gods looking down from the sky if those gods didn't actually fly? His theory went even further. The long, flattened areas that look like runways could, according to him, serve as a primitive guidance system. not necessarily for the landing of interstellar motherships themselves. Those would remain in orbit, but for the shuttles that ferried between orbit and the surface. Daniken speculated that when the gods departed, the natives tried to lure them back by imitating their signals and runways. Nazca may thus be a gigantic call into the void of space. Come back, we are here. Genetic manipulation created in their image. Daniken wasn't afraid to go against the current of Darwinian evolution in his reflections. He acknowledged evolution as a mechanism, but pointed to the jump that humanity took. While chimpanzees and gorillas remained on their evolutionary branch, humans suddenly split off and began building civilizations. Why? He found the answer in ancient texts. All mythologies, from Sumer to the Bible, agree on one sentence. Let us make man in our image, often in the plural. For Daniken, this was not a metaphor, but a description of a biological procedure. The Anunnaki, or those who came from the heavens, found primitive forms of life on Earth. They recognized the potential of our ancestors and decided to intervene. Daniken describes this process very technically. They took a cell, modified its genetic code, which is common practice in molecular biology today, inserted it back into the womb of a female, and let nature do the work. The result was a creature that was biologically terrestrial, but intellectually and genetically uplifted by extraterrestrial DNA. Daniken often pointed to Sumerian cylinder seals depicting spirals resembling DNA. And how could the Sumerians have known about the double helix when they didn't have microscopes? The secret of the Great Pyramid. What did Caliph al-Ma'mun find? Daniken's fascination with Egypt didn't end with a superficial admiration of the pyramids. It went much deeper. He highlighted a historical record from 820 AD, when Caliph al-Ma'mun forcibly entered the Great Pyramid for the first time. Official history is often stark on this point, stating they found nothing. However, Daniken loved to cite old Arab legends and apocryphal writings. According to these records, the chambers were not empty. In one room, they discovered a material that behaved like metal, but was flexible and indestructible. In another room, they found two strange beings. The texts speak of figures with helmets and in strange clothing. For Daniken, this was clear proof. Aliens or astronauts in spacesuits could have been lying in hibernation inside the pyramid. Modern archaeology considers these accounts to be myths, even though today's technology confirms anomalies. Muon scans by the Scan Pyramids Project in 2017 revealed another, as yet unopened, big void within the Great Pyramid. We know there are rooms there, but we don't have access to them, Daniken complained, calling for the courage to drill into the unknown. The Sphinx and drowned history. Another point of contention between Daniken and official Egyptology is the age of the Sphinx. While textbooks insist on a date around 2500 BC, Daniken cited geologists like Robert Schoch. They point to traces of water erosion on the body of the Sphinx and the walls of its enclosure. For such erosion to occur, the Sphinx must have been exposed to thousands of years of intense rainfall. In Egypt, however, such a climate last prevailed 10,000 years ago, long before the dynastic pharaohs. Furthermore, according to modern radar measurements, there are cavities and chambers beneath the Sphinx. Daniken reminds us of the prophecy of the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce regarding the Hall of Records, which is said to hide the wisdom of Atlantis and extraterrestrial visitors. So why don't archaeologists want to dig? Because it would disrupt the linear understanding of history. Daniken's theory of an ancient, highly advanced civilization simply does not fit into this model. Ancient nuclear wars. Critics often attack Daniken over the dating of artifacts. He, however, counters with an argument that is chilling. He reminds us that the radiocarbon dating method, C14, works reliably only if the examined object has not been exposed to radiation. Yet ancient Indian texts, such as the Mahabharata, describe weapons of the gods with effects resembling nuclear explosions, brighter than 1,000 suns, after which people's hair and nails fell out. If stones, bones, or organic remains were exposed to strong radiation, and increased radioactivity has been measured in places like Mohenjo-Daro, it changes the ratio of isotopes, rendering the entire C14 method useless. Objects may appear much younger or older than they actually are. All dating is likely wrong, claimed Daniken. If ancient cities were irradiated, our timeline is merely an illusion. Impossible technology, Puma Punku. During his travels, Daniken visited countless archaeological sites, but one stuck in his memory the most, Puma Punku in Bolivia. At an altitude of nearly 13,000 feet lie ruins that defy conventional history. These are gigantic blocks of diorite and granite, machined with such precision that they resemble modern prefabricated components with internal right angles and drilled holes. Daniken tells the story of Spanish conquistadors who, in the 16th century, asked the local Aymara people how they built these structures. The locals answered simply, "It wasn't us. It was the gods who descended from the sky and built it in a single night." Daniken asks, why would gods build stone platforms? His theory is pragmatic. If you arrive on a foreign planet, you need a base. You need a stable, flat surface for your equipment. That, according to him, is the purpose of Puma Punku, a logistics center for an extraterrestrial mission. Erich von Däniken did not seem resigned in his conclusions, quite the opposite. He saw hope. He realized that his generation might have only asked the questions that those who come after will have to answer. He viewed the entire phenomenon of pyramids and temples around the world as a global cargo cult, a desperate attempt by our ancestors to imitate the technology of the gods to lure them back. His final message is clear and unifying. When the extraterrestrials return, and they will return, we will not introduce ourselves to them as nations or religions. We will simply say, "We are humans. We are your descendants." Daniken passed the torch of knowledge onward, convinced that we are on the threshold of a reunion with our cosmic family. Safe travels, Erich.